Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik. Here for our second segment, we have Terry Halvorsen, the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Defense, Rob Foster, the Chief Information Officer of the Department of the Navy, Dave Bennett, the Chief Information Officer at DISA, and Rod Turk, the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the Department of Commerce. We're talking about profiles and excellence. We're talking about programs you're proud of, things that you've accomplished this past year. We'll start with Rod Turk. Rod, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about a program at Commerce that is making a big difference.
Sure, Jim. Thank you. Appreciate it. During 2014 with the Defense Reauthorization Act, that brought to us a new requirement here within the federal government called FTARA. I think everybody pretty much knows what FTARA is. But let me just kind of size this a little bit from a Department of Commerce standpoint. We have 12 components. Each one of those components are very, very diverse in their functionality. And for example, when I talk about the Department of Commerce, I mentioned that we have responsibilities at the surface of the sun all the way to the bottom of the ocean with NOAA. And then we go across on a horizontal frame. We have census, we have Patent and Trademark Office, sure. A very broad set of functionalities. So when we start talking about a FTARA-like requirement for us, it presents some unique challenges for us because of the diversity of the functionalities. Right. But we've been very successful over the past couple of years, since 2014, when this was placed upon us, in pulling together the strategic intent of FTARA, and we have been able to maintain a score of B for the past couple of review cycles. B plus this past one here that just came out in December. It's been a very, very successful program, but I will also tell you that it's also had multiple benefits for us. Okay. It's developed a strategic intent amongst the CIOs. It's been allowed us to be able to do review our investments, to put forward the various IT security programs and as well as other programs that we review investments for. And I would say that it enhances not only the CIO at the corporate level, but also the CIO at each one of our components. Excellent. And gives them a view into not only their investments, but also their strategies, which I think is a fantastic thing. I do too, and I understand that issue. When I was CIO at Treasury, back then the law enforcement agencies were still under Treasury. We didn't have Homeland. So law enforcement had dramatically different security requirements than, say, the IRS or the Financial Management Service. So putting in place, enterprise programs that can attack all of those different variances was always a challenge. Absolutely. And we all know the culture issues we have when we manage large entities like those. Let's talk to Dave Bennett at DISA. Dave, tell us about a program that you're proud of over this past year, and maybe how it impacted the mission.
Thanks. So I'll go with my computing ecosystem. Okay. So from a DISA perspective, we have responsibility for the core data centers within the Department of Defense. Right now we have 10. We're reducing, shutting down 2, so we'll have 8 at the end of that. And up to now, each of those have been an independent data center with its own set of tactics, techniques, procedures, as well as tool sets, as well as ways of doing business supporting the DoD applications we support. Because you are all acting and operating and optimizing at the each's level, we're not as efficient as we should be. We're not doing the things we ought to be doing from an enterprise perspective. And so this computing ecosystem activity is really about building one computing ecosystem so that we get away from 8 independent data centers doing their thing to one computing ecosystem where you have a standard set of processes, tools, TTPs, governance structures, and a common way of doing business, and focusing on how do we optimize from an enterprise perspective. And by doing that, we start driving the costs down, we drive the rates down, we get more efficient, more effective, and we see opportunities to leverage things in a way we've not done it before because we're now operating at the enterprise level. Yeah, and I know a lot of issues like data center consolidation and cloud computing all lend themselves to enterprise approach. And I used to always kid saying, show me an agency's mission statement that says manage IT systems. I mean, the idea is, the components should be focused on the mission and what they're trying to accomplish at the mission level without necessarily worrying. And I know DISA
plays a major enterprise role for the DoD. So I'm sure, and I believe email consolidation was one that was being worked.
So enterprise email was a capability we put out 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago. We have roughly 1.7 million users across DoD that are leveraging it today.
How about some lessons learned you'd like to pass on as a result of some of these?
Get the right people involved up front who believe in change, who are not interested in continuing to do things the way we've always done it, and give them the opportunity to tell you and show you new and innovative ways to do things, because they understand the environment, they understand how to make things better, and giving them the chance to change, they'll make things happen.
Yeah, I think that's a very good advice. Don't quote me on this, but I think it was Robert Kennedy that said 1/3 of everybody's against everything all the time, no matter what it is. And change and fear of change is an issue. For those that are willing to embrace change, they're the ones that likely get ahead in their careers.
Absolutely.
How about challenges? Any specific challenge along the way that you'd like to pass on?
Well, the one data point you made up front was culture and people.
Yeah.
It's always a challenge when you're trying to change. People who are afraid of the unknown, and they'll always push back. Just getting the idea that change is necessary and getting the culture to accept that is the key issues that you got to deal with as we make these big changes.
Yeah, I know everyone here is probably too young to remember Groucho Marx. We had that TV show where the magic word would come down. If the magic word was culture, someone would win the prize every radio show we do. Let's talk to Rob Foster over at the Department of the Navy. Rob, tell us some about a program and some mission issues that you're addressing that you feel you're making some great progress.
Sure. So this is actually completed, so I wanted to talk a little bit about a success story. It's not necessarily IT, but it's a dependency of IT. So it's streamlining the deployment of broadband. We have approximately 124 bases, however you want to count them, across the Department of the Navy. One of our challenges was to get broadband deployed, and when you look upstream, who's responsible for that was a challenge. So we had to get the right people, in this case, installations, environment, and energy owns the installations. Then we had the spectrum managers on the bases, and many of them did not report to the same folks throughout their chain of command. So normalizing those two, we pulled together a team, and essentially the objective was we've mapped the process, and it took 5 years to get broadband towers out onto a base because of the methodology that we used, and we changed that methodology, and it's down to 12 months or less. Wow. So we can talk a little bit about some of the challenges and things that we overcame, but the objective was to get broadband out there so that those devices and those families on bases and those missions being conducted on bases have an opportunity to have the vendor community support that in a more rapid fashion.
Great. I love talking about wireless, since in the past I've taken credit for inventing wireless. What are some of the challenges along the way that you'd like to pass on that others may learn from you?
So I think the question is how do you deploy things? We all in the IT community can blame finance, we can blame our acquisition community, whatever the case, but historically how we've deployed and distributed towers was through an RFI, an RFP, and through a lease. And so you get into a long, laborious discussion with all kinds of attorneys and acquisition professionals. That time frame when mapped out was 5 years. If you challenge that question, why do I need to actually do a lease? The real estate professionals that were at the team, the base installation spectrum folks, and the public works folks, the actual definition became easement. And if you just change that one word, you've just changed your entire process, because for an attorney, a lease versus an easement is a big deal. And so we've got instructions that are signed out. We're actually using easements to do access to towers onto bases. Those companies can go and build, but it's not a proprietary solution. So the first one in builds it. The second one can use that same tower at a lower altitude probably.
Okay.
And then we can have more carriers on that tower faster. And the outcome would be our end users, in this case, are folks that are possibly in very remote places, don't have to have twisted pairs of their house. They might actually be something that they would have out in town. So there is a demand there. We have 124 bases, as I mentioned. Some of them are as large as a state. So when you look at Camp Pendleton, it's a huge facility. Yeah. And there are some dead spots that I think when you have the opportunity to put towers out there a lot more rapidly, you'll have both a mission and a capability that a family may need.
Yeah, so if I have this right, this is benefiting both the Department of the Navy as well as the local community. Is that correct?
Well, it would depend upon their tower placement, whether or not they'd have usage outside the base. At some of them, they might not be able to go that far. The point is the base has a mission and it has a population that could be served. Historically, they have not come on, that being the carriers, because it's been too laborious and time intensive. This is going to help. And also the funding that is created, or the revenue, 50% of that stays on the base for the base commander, so that's an incentive for them to be desiring that, and 50% stays with the tower lease organization that maintains it. So it's a self-fulfilling opportunity.
And a lesson learned, pass on?
The lesson learned, I think, would be to challenge why we always do the things we've done, get the right people in the room, and then go start with the end in mind, and that is 5 years is absolutely unacceptable to deploy any kind of a tower.
Excellent, well said. Terry Halvorsen over at the DOD. It sounds like DOD just in and of itself is a huge challenge.
Small.
But tell us, there's probably thousands of things you can pick from, but if I asked you to zero in on something that you've accomplished the last year, what problem or mission objective would you zero in on to talk about?
So let me cheat a little bit and first tell you about, you just heard two of them.
Okay.
So in addition to what Dave's done with his ecosystem, DISA has for the last 3 years made significant rate reductions. What Rob is doing, he's already sharing with the other services, and they are already starting to benefit from his actions. And I'm going to cheat on my answer here. I'm going to tell you about something we've done that's not yet done, but just the decision to do it was a big idea.
Okay.
For the first time, DOD has made the decision, and we are going to unilaterally make a decision to go to one operating system within DOD. We are going to Windows 10.
I read about that.
Yes, we currently run, I believe, every operating system that was ever invented. We've got to change that.
I bet you run a few too that are so far back that you wouldn't be able to fix them if you tried to.
We've made some progress in getting rid of some of those, but we have a lot of them, and that results in a level of network complexity that you just can't manage very well. So the decision to do this will certainly get improvements in cybersecurity of the network. It will improve our patching processes, but what it really improves is our ability to understand and see the network and networks across all of DoD. And this will include all of DoD. So as just a bit of a scale, it will impact more than 3 million Windows-based laptops, desktops, tablets, major networks that are the biggest in the world, and at a scale of money that's about $7.5 billion just for the changeover. This is unprecedented for the department. It's also unprecedented for industry. This is a big plus for Microsoft. They've jumped in to help this. So have other companies that are doing support. So we're making good progress on it. We're starting to get all of the initial logistical planning, testing, and implementation done. But the biggest, I think, success is there is a complete commitment throughout the department. That's all the services, all the agencies, that we're going to get it done. Everybody's doing exactly what they need to do. We have rolled out to date about 250,000 seats. That sounds like a lot, but it's about 12% of the DOT population, so we've got more to do. The goal is to probably hit about 90% by the end of 17 and then finish up some of the harder parts of the department.
Yeah, now the benefits are obvious, I mean, just based on what you just said there, but in terms of challenges, I'm sure you've got the culture issue when you're talking about converting and the change issue, but tell us a little bit about some of the other challenges you're bumping into along the way.
I think the first challenge is, and you just heard me talk about, is scale. I mean, no one has done this type of turnover on any scale. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, and I've said this before, as the DOD, you are the IT leader, manager, facilitator, somebody said counselor, therapist, for the largest enterprise in the world. So you have to get the Navy, DISA, Army, Marine Corps, all of our what I like to call independent federated companies that are all within the Fortune 50 if they were standalone, together to make a decision. That's the single biggest challenge it takes to move most things in DoD. We keep saying it's not the technology, it is the commitment and then understanding how all of the finance works. That's the second
and we
biggest
heard
challenge.
on our first panels from Renee where she's saying you have to persevere at it and you have to stay at it and you have to constantly reinforce it in order to get there. And yeah, I can understand the issues from my days. I know you know, my days in Homeland when you tried to pull together, you know, all these diverse entities and expect them all to begin thinking in one direction was a real challenge for everyone. So real quickly, we've got just a couple minutes left. Do you think we're getting out in front of these challenges? Let's come right down the table. Rod, what do you think? We in front of them?
Well, I've often said the biggest issue we have is cybersecurity and keeping up in the cybersecurity realm with the technology. Mm-hmm. And so I would ask as a CISO at Commerce, if I could just stay ahead, just stay with the technology rather than try to get ahead of it, I would be extremely
Excellent
happy.
way to put it, you know, because the bad guys are watching what the good guys are doing all the time, too. What do you think, Dave? We get in front of this stuff?
I think we're making good progress. I still think there's a lot of things we need to do. I think we've got to leverage automation more than we do, because the reality is we face a threat that moves at the speed of electrons.
Yeah,
and if we're
I agree with you.
And if we're moving at the speed of human decision,
right,
we're already behind the power
curve. We're moving
curve.
into a world where decision-making is approaching time equals zero. I mean, it's got to be instantaneously. And I'm sometimes frustrated as I learn about technologies in the industry and all as to why it takes so long to get them into government. Rob, what do you think? We get in front of this stuff?
Absolutely. I think a couple of things. The technology is moving fast. I think it's more complex, and therefore people can't solve it on their own. So bringing all the people to the table with the right desired outcome is how we move forward.
Excellent. Mr. Halvorsen, you have the last word on this. What do you think? Are we getting out in front of some of these challenges and using technology to make the improvements we need to make for the future?
So I can give you a couple answers. In respect to cybersecurity, I have measurable data now that says we're getting ahead of a lot of work to do, and are we there yet? No, but in DOD we have the cyber scorecard, talked about it, so we know that. I think to follow up on Dave, automation's the first step, but frankly the place we have to get to is autonomous systems, where the network can be self-healing, self-diagnostic, doesn't take. And then the next piece of that, and we're doing some work now with some companies like IBM and others, is to actually get to the AI where you start and the network learns where it's going. It will take all of those things to solve the problems we're talking about.
Excellent. Some great stuff here. It's easy to see why you folks are in the positions you're in. Great thought leaderships here. I want to thank the panelists from Segment 2 for taking time from your busy schedules to be with us. We're going to take another short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.